What would you do if you inherited $2 billion from an estranged relative? Would you buy a mansion, travel the world, or maybe throw legendary parties? For one man, this is exactly the situation he found himself in. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the Manhattan mansion of James Henry Smith. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. In 1854, James Henry was born into a rural family in Lake County, Illinois, but growing up, he knew that his uncle George happened to be one of the richest men in the country. George, who famously went by the nickname Chicago George, had emigrated to the New World following the Panic of 1837, which saw the newly formed United States in a major financial crisis. As he traveled through the Midwest, he saw an opportunity to buy up land for pennies on the dollar. One thing led to another, and he eventually ended up circulating his own banknotes, which were dubbed George Smith's money. These notes were backed by gold and silver, and within a few short years, he found himself backing the majority of banknotes in Chicago. He diversified further by founding insurance companies and making wise investments, and now with a fortune, he moved back to Europe to retire and live out the rest of his life, never having married nor had kids. Then in 1899, when he passed away, news traveled to his nephew back in rural Illinois that his uncle had willed his estate to be split evenly between his nephews. James' portion of the inheritance was $50 million, the modern equivalent of over $1.9 billion today. With his newfound fortune, James quickly found himself in New York, trading on Wall Street and watching his net worth skyrocket. To secure his place in high society, in 1906, James married Anne Armstrong, who came from an old money family. Together they would take the city by storm and redefine what it meant to live life luxuriously. The couple set off on their honeymoon traveling the world, the details of their lavish escapades making it into the gossip columns back in New York. When they were to return from their extended honeymoon, it would be time for them to settle down and join the ranks of the Fifth Avenue elite as the newest couple on the scene. As timing would have it, William C. Whitney's palatial mansion at the corner of Fifth Avenue and 68th was on the market following his passing. Just as Whitney's heirs were ready to start auctioning off his extensive collections of art and antiques, James threw in a bid to buy the house fully furnished. After making a few changes and rearranging some furniture and artworks, the couple would be ready to move in together when they returned from their honeymoon. Before we head inside, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings. Pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring today's video. Now back to our tour. As we head inside, let's take a quick moment to orient ourselves, noting that we enter the dry moat level, which is noted here on the floor plan as the basement. Entering the mansion, we find ourselves at the landing of a bifurcated staircase. We'll go down before we go up. This brings us to the reception hall, clad floor to ceiling in stone with a large fireplace off to our side. Directly opposite the staircase we descended is another grand staircase which is meant to easily bring guests to the ballroom. At one end of the hall, we'll find the heavy iron grills leading to the elevator. At the other, we'll find the reception room, which is where we would be ushered by the family staff if visiting as guests. The reception room is decorated in white and gold, with mirrors set within each paneled section. When the Smiths were hosting large parties, the reception room would double as a cloakroom, where we can imagine coats being hung on racks which would be set up by the staff just for each event. We'll see the staff quarters which occupy most of this floor later. In the meantime, let's make our way back up the staircase where we first entered. Once again, let's glance at the floor plan just to get a feel for not only the layout, but the massive scale of these rooms. Taking our final step up, we arrive in the main hall, where I'll note that the picture we are seeing now is just for reference, as it is from William Whitney's time in the house. As we switch back to photos from the Smiths' time, we see that not much has been changed out, save for the light fixtures and a few odds and ends. And even though we can feel the grand staircase pulling us forward, tempting us to head upstairs, there are some incredible rooms we must first explore on this level. To our left is the library, finished out floor to ceiling in rich wood paneling which has been draped over by antique European tapestries. As we continue shifting our gaze, we find electric lights and large windows flooding the room with natural light. To the far end, glass-paned bookcases are covered in intricate carvings, and above us, the ceiling is inlaid with salvaged Italian panels highlighted with hints of blues and reds in the tracery, and each centered on a gilded rosette. The library opens into the drawing room, which doubles as the music room, where we find some of the Smiths' most prized furnishings staged more for viewing than for using. The white marble fireplace features heavy relief work in its upper mantle, which is supporting some of the most expensive porcelains in the family's possession. As we move towards the window, we can finally see the silk wall treatment shimmering in the low lighting making its way through the shears. Had we made our way over to the other side of the main hall, we would have found the dining room, its walls covered in Italian paintings which have had their canvases carefully cut from their frames and seamlessly applied to the walls. In this photo, we get a better idea of how this looked as the painting's subjects are more visible. But to complete this picture, the description for the doorway states that it was known as the Golden Doorway, being gilded in its entirety and crowned by the Lion of St. Mark. To the far end of the dining room, we find an opening marked by gilded columns and covered over by velvet drapes. This is the conservatory. The floors are inlaid with multiple types of marble to create a pattern, and the glass is a mixture of opalescent and plate glass. Above us, the dorm would be lit by natural light in the day and by electric light at night. And behind us on the wall, concealing the butler's pantry, we find an ancient arcade which was salvaged from a garden in Rome dating back thousands of years. The conservatory opens into the ballroom, which is the largest room in the house, measuring 63 feet long by about 46 feet wide. The walls are clad in walnut panels, which were salvaged from a chateau in France, which each contain a lunette with the insignia of King Louis XIV. Hidden away out of sight, behind heavy grills, are the musician's gallery and the pipes of a grand organ. And up on the ceiling, a vibrant mural painted in oil spans nearly the entire length of the room. If the Smiths only wanted their guests traveling to the ballroom, the other rooms could be shut off with steel doors, and guests would be directed down the corridor which connects the main hall to the ballroom. Let's take another look at this level's floor plan to note the butler's pantry between the dining room and the ballroom. This was a multi-story pantry for ease of access by the staff, which connects down to the basement. Before we explore the family's private quarters, we'll look through the staff quarters in the basement, starting with the rooms off the staff entrance hall. Here we find the kitchen, which has been fitted with only the most modern appliances for the time. There is also a large pantry for storing dry goods, and for everything needing chilled, there is a massive walk-in refrigerator. The servants' dining room is stately and proper, one of the perks of working for the Smiths. And the butler is even granted his own sitting room with electric lights and fine furniture. As for the family's laundry, that was a full-time job, with Mrs. Smith being known to change outfits several times per day, and bedsheets always being expected to be crisp and clean. Now that we've seen behind the scenes, let's make our way back over to the grand staircase and begin heading upstairs. The staircase winds its way around a skylight, continuing the same polished marble cladding the floors and walls. As we arrive at the second floor, we can take a step back to appreciate the stair hall's simple but elegant composition. On this level, we find a guest room, a maid's room, and a handful of bedrooms. The third floor is where things get interesting again, so we'll zip through the bedrooms, starting with the blue room. Then we'll head over to the Louis XVI room, which contains several antique French pieces. This room connects to the white and gold boudoir, which carries the general theme of the bedroom. This then connects to the sitting room, which in turn opens to the antehall, which feeds back to the stair hall. Many of the bedrooms in this house are named after colors, and there are more bedrooms than there are basic colors, and with that said, this is the first red room we'll see. The plan for the third floor might be a misprint because the grand staircase does not continue up to it, however, I do believe the rooms to be arranged correctly. As we travel down the third floor hall, this is where I believe a mistake was made in the floor plan. We can see the arcade overlooking an open-air area above the skylight below. With that said, let's check out the billiards room first. Here we can see the ceiling height is shrinking, and painted millwork is being introduced as a less formal setting for each room. On this level, we find more color-based rooms, starting with another blue room. Then we'll head over to the green room, where we can imagine Mr. Smith's single gentleman friend staying as guest. Then we get to the pink room, which was notably for Mrs. Smith's single lady friends. The last room we'll see on this floor is another red room, and possibly the smallest guest room in the house. Finally, as we reach the top of the house on the fourth floor, we find it to be incredibly utilitarian. This level is reserved almost exclusively for staff quarters, where we can imagine probably 2 servants to each bedroom. Unfortunately, James only got to enjoy his mansion for the brief period between his wedding and honeymoon. While the couple were in Japan, his heart gave out and he passed away, leaving Mrs. Smith with an estate of $70 million, the modern equivalent of over $2.3 billion. She decided to auction off the entirety of the house's contents. Everything from antique porcelains to sofas, chairs, and tables had to go. Even salvaged doors that were centuries old were up for grabs. The auction saw the house stripped of its contents and many of its architectural elements, and finally, in 1942, the house was demolished and eventually replaced by this building. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Which room was your favorite, or maybe something else caught your attention? Either way, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.